Okay, now we're going to look at example 2. There's 2 problems in here, and we're going to look at looking at a graph and writing the equation of the graph. So the first thing I want to do is decide, is this a sine curve or a cosine curve? So I'm going to look at where it starts. And I have to keep in mind that sine curves always start at the origin at 0. And cosine curves will kind of start at what your amplitude is. So you're either going to start whatever your A value is. So if I look at this one, this is not starting at 0. And so here is one cycle of my curve. So I'm going to assume that this is a cosine curve. So I'm going to be using y equals a cosine b of x to write my equation. So I need to find a and b. So another thing I want to notice here is that I don't start up high, I start down low. So that tells me I have a flip over the x-axis, and my x value or my y values are flipping over the x-axis. So that means that I'm going to have a negative a value. So I can look here, and my a is going to be this distance here, and that's a distance of 1, 2, 3 in the negative direction. So my a is going to be negative 3. Next, I need to figure out my b. To figure out my b, I need to look at the period. So if I look at this, the period of my graph is 4 pi. So the period is equal to 4 pi. I know that to find the period of a graph, I take 2 pi, it's equal to 2 pi over b. So if I set these two equal to each other, I can figure out what b is. So I'm going to kind of back into b. So I'm going to say 4 pi is equal to 2 pi over b, and I can just cross multiply here. So I get b, actually I write it like this, 4 pi b is equal to 2 pi, divide by 4 pi, and I'm going to get b is equal to 1/2. So I have my a, I have my b, so now I can write my equation. I'm going to get y is equal to, it needs to be a negative because that's flipped over the x-axis and it has an amplitude of 3. So y equals negative 3 cosine, my b is 1/2 x. And that's the equation of my cosine curve. I'm now going to do the next one. This is our last example. So once again, we want to look and decide, is this a sine or a cosine? So if I look at this curve, it starts at 0 or at the origin. And here would be one cycle of my curve. So that is one period. Since it starts at the origin, I know that I'm going to be writing an equation that's for sine. So it's going to be y is equal to a sine b of x. So once again, we need to find our a and our b. I want to take note again that instead of going middle up, middle down, middle, I go middle down, middle up, middle. So that means I'm going down first. So once again, I'm flipping over the x-axis. So my a is going to be negative. My a is the distance, my amplitude. My amplitude here is 1, and I'm going in the negative direction, so it's going to be negative 1. My period here starts at 0, goes all the way over to 2. So the period here is equal to 2, and we know to find the period we use the equation 2 pi over b. So I'm going to set these two equal to each other to solve for b. So 2 is equal to 2 pi over b. cross multiply, and I get b is equal to pi. So I have my b, I have my a, I can write my equation. Y is equal to negative sine pi x. So it's important to check. You need to find your A, your B, decide what kind of curve. Is it a sine curve or a cosine curve? Sine curve's the easiest. It starts at 0. And double check, do you go up first or down first? If you go down first, you know you're flipping over the x-axis, and so your A has to be negative.